Now, on yesterday's show, we were talking about the ongoing anti-racism protests and the riots going on all over America and now in the UK. Those follow the death of 46-year-old George Floyd, who was killed during an arrest in Minneapolis last week. Derek Chauvin, the police officer arresting him, was seen kneeling on his neck for almost 9 minutes, despite his repeated cries of, "I can't breathe." He was pronounced dead around an hour later. This tragic event might have happened in America, but it's something that is really resonating over here too. And Kelle, you've been talking to your children about this, haven't you?
Yes. Firstly, I'm personally devastated by what I witnessed. But yes, I felt it was really important for my children to understand what's happening. So last night, I took it upon myself to sit them both down and selected a piece of footage that I thought was age appropriate, and I showed them what had happened to George. And my 6-year-old was horrified. She just kept saying, "Mummy, why are they doing that to him? Why are they doing that to him? Aren't they the police? Aren't they supposed to help him?" And my 8-year-old was the opposite. He was quite pensive and took some time to think about what he'd seen and process it. And we had a long conversation about what happened. And I tried my best to articulate what he was seeing, because for them, the police are there to help and to protect. And I've taught them, if you're ever in trouble, run straight to the police, they will help you. So they found it really a struggle to understand why a policeman would do this.
I mean, Kelle, looking at all the footage that's unfolding, a lot of people are sort of saying, well, this is America. America's a much more racist society than we are perhaps in the UK. Would you agree with that, or have you had experiences here that...
Well, most definitely. I mean, even if we look at the cases of people like Stephen Lawrence, who was definitely a race crime involved there, it's definitely relevant here in the UK. For my son, it's even happened to him in school settings. He went to a school club, and was told he couldn't play with this particular toy because he was brown. And, I dealt quite harshly with that particular setting at the time, because Regan came home really upset, and he was saying, "Mummy, why would they say that?" Because I've brought my children up to be quite colourless, they colourblind in terms of not judging anybody. So for Regan to come to me and be quite upset like that, I was like, actually, I need to now deal with this differently, because I had raised them in that way, but actually the real world that they're living in isn't the same, unfortunately.
And
So
can I just clarify, that was another child that said that to him?
Yeah, unfortunately, he was told by another child, "You can't play with this toy because you're brown." So
Kelle,
yeah, I challenge.
Sorry.
Yes.
No, I was talking to a mixed race friend of mine yesterday. So she was saying as well how she was brought up, and I was horrified that 20 years ago a white uncle of hers, and I'm just curious as to does this still happen, do you think, in some parenting within the community, that her white uncle had said to her, "Speak your truth and face the reprisals, or bite your tongue and get ahead in life." Basically trying to shut the child down in order to get on. And I mean, I would have thought that we'd moved on. Do you think we've moved on massively since that?
You know what? It's kind of similar to what my dad would say. Just keep quiet, keep your head down, and get on with things. But definitely not. It's not how I've raised my children. There was an incident once when I was in a park, and I had Kelle in my tummy. So I was probably about, 6 months pregnant, and Regan was with me. And there was a group of young lads, and they basically called me the N-word and said that I was a black B word, and I was to get out of the park. And I was horrified by this, because where I live, which is a rural neighbourhood, but still I didn't expect that to happen. And so I wanted to show my son, one, that you shouldn't be bullied. So I faced the bullies, even though I was with my young child and I was pregnant. I said, "Okay, we're now going to go and find your parents, and we're going to discuss what you've just said to me in a public place, because I think it's unacceptable." And they immediately cowered, because they could see I was really adamant and I wasn't going to let this go. And they immediately backed down and apologized and said, "I'm really sorry. I don't know where that came from. I don't know why I said that, etc., etc." But most definitely not. I wanted to show my son that, one, you have to stand up for stand up to bullies, and two, I wanted to show them that their behaviour was wrong and unacceptable, and I wanted to deal with their parents, because if your children are saying these things, what are you teaching them, and how are you showing them to actually, what ways are you telling them to live in life? Because it's acceptable.
Because a 5-year-old boy, going back to Regan's experience, a 5-year-old boy, that's learned behaviour, that a 5-year-old said that to him, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you're 100% right, Jane. They would have learnt that behaviour from somewhere, in the same way that I said I brought up my children to be, completely colourblind. Somebody is bringing up their children to think differently about different people. And that includes, for me, all kinds of differences, whether that's that you've got a red head, or you're wearing glasses. I don't think that kind of behaviour is acceptable in any case. So for me, the racism that Regan felt from that child, I went and dealt with the parent in that situation. I asked the parent when on collection, when I went to pick the child up, when I went to pick Regan up, I said to the parent, I said, are you aware of what's happened? And I explained what happened. And I said, I'm really sad to hear that this has happened. And I wanted to challenge the parent, not in an aggressive fashion, more about education, because for me, that's where I'm coming from. But the parent was horrified and couldn't believe that their child had said this. So I knew that it hadn't come from this particular parent. So it must have been brought, picked up from somewhere else, school ground behaviour, or television, or some other way. But yeah, if it's happening in the home, it definitely needs to be challenged.
Kelle, I wanted to ask you about, obviously, you've mentioned how you were brought up to be polite, polite but firm, but even in the face of overt racism. And I'm not talking about, schoolyard stuff, but this is, you're bringing your children up in a beautiful way to obviously stand up to people. And I like how you call them bullies rather than racism, because at the end of the day, speaking to anybody horribly, regardless as to why, you mentioned hair colour, is just wrong. Where do you see us going from now? Because, Denise, you mentioned something that happened 20 years ago. We keep thinking, surely not again, surely things should have changed. Where can you see this going? And what can we all do as a society to help?
Well, I've noticed some really great posts from what it sounds awful to say, but white people, just because I don't ever use that term. For me, people are people, but from Caucasian or white people who've posted, which for me, those posts are personally, for me, more poignant than if a black person posted, because it would be understandable for a black person to post because they are outraged by what's happened. But when a white person sends a message, it, for me, resonates more. For example, some of the gatherings that have happened in London, and when the cameras, sort of scan across people and you're seeing white people standing up for you, that for me makes me feel, accepted, and that somebody else is thinking about how we as a culture and how we as a people feel. So I think any kind of post that you can do that kind of highlights how wrong this behaviour is positive. But for me, it's all about education. What are we going to resolve by looting and burning down other black people's shops, which is what's happened in America?
Exactly.
How is that going to help anything? We've got to talk about education, and it's education that's got to be structured. It has got to be added into schools. It has to be added to the curriculum, because it's not working. It's evident. It's happened to my son. He's 8 years old. It happened at age 5.
Yeah.
It's evident that education is the key.